Hello everybody. My name is Michael. I'm with Mac Insurance. I'm a insurance agency based out of Portland. I'll do a little slideshow for you guys, provide some information on tiny house insurance and stuff like that. And if you have any questions in between the presentation, you can ask them in the Q&A below. I'll see if I can answer it during the presentation or save it till the end. But yeah, I'll get started. Let me just start by sharing my screen. Let's see here. Bear with me. Apologize. So we'll just start here. All right. So at Insurance, we're tiny house and alternative living specialists for insurance. And a little bit about us. Let's see here. So we're an independent insurance brokerage for insurance. So we do all kinds of insurance. Tiny house insurance is just kind of one of our big markets, though. We've been around since 2013, so roughly 10 years. And we've been specializing in tiny house and alternative living insurance since 2016. So about 7 years, 7 of our 10 years of existence. The staff includes myself, I'm the owner, and I have two tiny house specialists, Peter and Lorna. They do only tiny house stuff. So if you ever call into our office and you speak with one of those people, they're going to be your best bet in terms of if you have questions or looking for a tiny house quote. And we're located here in Portland, Oregon. I'm not sure how long any of you have been in the tiny house community, but Portland, Oregon it's kind of always been a big hub for tiny house insurance. So for tiny houses in general. So it's kind of funny that tiny house insurance kind of also started here a tiny bit with our agency. So different types of tiny house insurance. For anyone who's looking to buy a tiny house or has already purchased one, you've probably seen a few options online on what types of tiny house insurance there are. And we'll go over those pretty briefly, but kind of, I guess, maybe the most common or maybe easiest to obtain, I guess it just depends, is RV insurance. If you have an RV tiny house insurance, you could qualify for RV insurance, and I'll get more into that later. Mobile home park model insurance. So basically a tiny house or a park model that may look like a tiny house that is under 400 square feet. There's also van conversions. That's becoming more and more popular. So people who have vans and things like that, who have converted them and are living in them full time. And then there's actual tiny house insurance. So this is tiny house insurance that is specifically made for tiny houses. That's what our agency carries. And we also do hard-sided yurts. So there's a lot of soft-sided yurts, but we can only do hard-sided. So that's kind of new to the market a little bit, you could say. Give me a second here. And then what does not qualify for tiny house insurance? So this doesn't happen very often, but we do like to let people know, because if you are trying to get into a tiny house, you should get into a tiny house that is insurable. So converted sheds, I see these coming up more and more often. These are basically like Home Depot sheds, tough built sheds that people have converted into livable spaces, livable dwellings is what we would call it. Those would not qualify for tiny house insurance. There's barns and cabins that may fit into this category, but again, that they're not meant to be lived in, but people have converted them to make them livable, but it would not qualify for any insurance program that I am aware of. Same with converted trailers. So this could be like a semi-trailer that people have converted into a livable dwelling. Again, same as converted sheds. It's not meant to be lived in, and there's not a product I am aware of where it is insurable. And then self-converted vans, similar coverage does exist for it, but it's limited. It just depends how it was converted. I'm going to take a moment to look at the questions here. There's some questions here, so. Okay, this one I'll answer really quick. Certified, do you require? So I'll kind of get into that. I mean, our agency does not require any certification, but for the types of tiny house policies I mentioned in the previous slide, it's most likely going to be required. So let me see here. These are just types of coverages to be aware of. So I'll just kind of go through that really quick. So dwelling, of course, this is the tiny house itself. This can be listed as most commonly as dwelling coverage. It will show up on the policy as or on the quote as dwelling coverage. It may show if it's an RV. Man, I don't remember offhand, but it's going to show like value of the RV, and it may also show as comp and collision. But we'll get into that later. In your policy, if you have decks, if you have solar panels, if you have detached sheds, separate structures is what's going to cover that. And of course, your personal belongings, that's all going to fall under personal property. And of course, liability. Not a lot of people are super aware of how liability works, but basically, depending on the type of coverage you should have, but on a typical homeowner's policy, liability protects you from lawsuits from, well, pretty much anybody. But most commonly, when people are on your property, they get hurt. There'll usually be a guest medical coverage first. It's usually like $1,000 to $5,000, covers the first amount of their medical bills. Any lawsuit that arises from that is going to come from your liability, which you see it ranges. It can be as low as $50,000 to as high as $1 million. And average liability claim is somewhere in the $300,000 range. So I always recommend to have at least $300,000 or more. And it covers you all over the world. So if you were, for whatever reason, even playing basketball with your friends and someone would get hurt, maybe you tripped them or something, your liability also covers that kind of stuff. So it doesn't always have to be in your home, and it's super, super important, and a lot of people just kind of ignore it, but I'm a big advocate on it. And something that's also very new when looking at tiny house insurance is the theft of the tiny house. So in typical homeowners policies, that coverage does not exist because in stick-built homes is what we call them. They don't move. They can't be stolen. But in tiny house insurance, they can. So that's something to be aware of if you're ever shopping around. Let me see here. Got some couple questions coming up. I think I'll just save these towards the end, just so I can get through the presentation, because I notice I think we're almost halfway through, and I got like a bunch of more slides. So we'll save those towards the end. And oh, this is also very important, year-round mobile coverage. So just like in regular homes, they don't move. Tiny house insurance, you got to make sure that if you are mobile, that option is available. And if you're mainly stationary, if you plan to move in the future, maybe you're going to stay in one spot for 1 to 3 years and you want to move, you still got to check if your policy allows that, because it might just be a one-time move that maybe another permanent location. Your policy or your coverage may not like that, and they could drop you. That does happen. So we'll start with RV coverage, because I think that's kind of like what people are more aware of. So to be honest, this policy is the best fit for recreational use tiny houses. So this means you use it just like an RV, and that's the way you plan to use it. you're going to get the most bang out of your buck in this type of policy with that type of use. Um, and the reason why I say that is because, well, if unless you're an insurance agent or an insurance lawyer, if you read the policy, there's a lot of restrictions, exclusions, or just coverages that are tiny house specific that are not on an RV policy. And there has been times when there is claims and adjusters come out and they will look at the tiny house and like, well, it doesn't look like an RV. Um, it looks like a livable dwelling, and that's what it looks like it's built for and used for. And so we're going to deny this claim. That does happen a lot. So unless you use it like an actual RV, I wouldn't really recommend these type of policies. Number one, a lot of these policies are actual cash value. So what that means is just like a vehicle, a tiny house will depreciate over time, and the coverage will adjust for that depreciation. So if you purchase the tiny house for $100,000 and 5 years down the road, it's worth 80,000. And to get a new tiny house, the same type tiny house, maybe it costs 120,000 and you have a big claim. Let's say you have a fire is covered. And it's a total loss. Well, the most you'll get is $80,000 because that's what it's valued at the time of the loss. But it costs $120,000 to get a new tiny house. So that means you're going to have to come up with $40,000 to get basically the same type of tiny house. And that's where RCV or replacement cost value comes in. So some RVs, if you buy it brand new, you qualify for RCV, so replacement cost, which means if you insured it for 100 grand and it costs, let's say, I don't know, 5 years later, if you're adjusting for inflation and your coverage is 120 and it costs 120 to buy a new one, you get paid out 120. So you get paid out what it costs to replace your tiny house. So as long as the coverage is there and you're paying for that coverage, you will get the amount it costs to replace it, which is far superior. You don't have to worry about coming up with an extra amount of money like in ACV. So in short, depreciation is not accounted for. Separate structures, so sheds and decks, not typically included. And personal property, you have the option of having actual cash value or replacement cost. That's typically not a problem. But where you can experience problems is in the liability. So if it's an RV policy, it can be provided the liability like if it was a automobile, or if you do live in it full time, there's something that is called full timer insurance or vacation liability, and those are two different things. So if you ever get an RV policy, make sure you have full timer liability, not vacation liability. They cover two separate things, and if you're ever in a liability claim, it's not going to be good. You're gonna, I'll keep it that way. It's not going to be good if you don't have the right liability. There is some restrictions and exclusions for tiny houses specifically in most RV policies. So that's why I'm not a big fan of them. So if you have a tiny house and you live in it full time, a lot of RV policies, I'll say if there's 10 insurance companies, 3 of them are going to allow full time, and then maybe 1 of them will allow a tiny house. So it's very strict. And if you just happen to get with the wrong insurance company and you get in a claim, that's not going to be very nice. A lot of claim denials. That does happen a lot. So make sure you have the right policy. You talk to someone who is aware of the restrictions and exclusions in RV policies like myself, and we can help you out with that. And last thing, if you do plan to use it like an Airbnb, you can't use it as secondary residence either. So let's see. And then we have mobile home park model. So these are most ideal for actual park models. A lot of tiny houses kind of look like park models, but are not park models. So again, you got to kind of be careful here. If you purchased it from a park model dealer and it's built to the specifications of a park model, you're going to have no problem finding park model insurance. And that's what I typically recommend if it is a true park model. If it is a tiny house and it is like 300 square feet, and it's not built to the spec of a park model, and you somehow get park model insurance, when it comes to a claim, insurance lawyers and adjusters will look at the policy and basically will be like, well, this is not a typical park model, so we don't need to legally provide coverage. And that does happen. I see a lot of this happen a lot, but if it is a park model, um, like a true park model, get park model insurance. It's going to be the most ideal fit for you because you're typically stationary. You're going to have replacement cost value, which is great. Um, and it provides all the standard coverage that you need. So dwellings, separate structures, liability, it gives you all that stuff. And you don't need to worry about the mobile stuff. And let's see here. Kind of already mentioned it, but most tiny houses won't qualify for it. And they typically can't be used as a rental and Airbnb. So, and if you don't if you use it as a primary, this is park model insurance. I am a fan of if it is a true park model. But if you plan to use it as a secondary, or actually not a secondary, you can use it as secondary in a park model policy. But if you plan to use it as an Airbnb, you may want to get a different type of policy. And I'll touch on this very briefly for van conversions. It is a limited market. We only have access in Oregon and Washington since we're based out of Oregon. And there's a few different ways to insure these. There's like a good, better, and absolute, well, good. There's like a worst and okay, and that's how it should be kind of model for it. So if it's converted by a van conversion specialist, so they sell you a, let's say a Ram ProMaster, they bought it, they converted it, and it's all legit, and on your title it says RV, you can insure it like an RV policy, and it's going to be a much better fit for it. You can purchase a full-timer policy. Again, got to be careful who you go with, but the premiums are typically going to be lower in this type of policy. So it's been all done professionally. It may cost you the most amount of money in terms of like finding like a van conversion specialist to do it on your own vehicle or purchasing it brand new. Might cost you the most amount of money, but it's going to be the least hassle in terms of insurance. Next would probably be a self-converted van that does not have a lot of customizations. You can typically insure these with almost any insurance company on regular auto insurance. Again, want to check the restrictions about full-timer if that is what you expect to use it for. But if the customizations are under 10K for most insurance companies, that's not a problem. Premiums are still pretty good. You probably won't have too much headaches there. But if you do a full-on conversion, like it is a $50,000 conversion or $20,000 conversion, you're going to have a hard time finding insurance. You can maybe get liability only, but as soon as you're in an accident, you're out of luck. You're not going to be able to get your van repaired the way you customized it or the way you built it. And your only option, or a couple of your only options, are going to be like commercial auto, which tends to be more expensive. And let's see, and yeah, please check with your carriers about full-time coverage, or check with us. Give us a call. There's also that option. And then we have the actual tiny house insurance product. So this is the product that we mainly offer. It is a comprehensive homeowner's policy specifically made for tiny houses. So this does not have exclusions and restrictions like the other policies that we mentioned. So you can use this as an Airbnb. It's going to be replacement cost, full-timers, secondary, whatever. I mean, mobile, it doesn't matter. It's built for the tiny house dweller. Unlike with, let me see here, I move my screen a little bit. So unlike with some of our competitors or some of the other policies, the RV mobile homes will have restrictions and exclusions because those types of policies have been around for a very long time without tiny houses being part of the equation. So a lot of these policies just don't have it in the policy language to include tiny houses. Other policies are going to be ACB, and you're going to have a tough time, or potentially a tough time, in finding a policy that will take it for the right usage, primary, secondary, Airbnb, that kind of stuff, where in an actual tiny house homeowners policy, you won't have that problem. Also, Airbnb problems there, and the exclusion, I already mentioned that. And then, of course, you'll have a 1-800 number compared to in a local agency like ours. It's going to be maybe not, depending on what state you're located in, but it won't be a local number, let's say, but it will be myself, Peter, or Lorna answering the phone. So it's always going to be the same 3 people. So a little bit about our agency. So products we offer: tiny house homeowners insurance, myself, and one other agency who's a buddy of mine. We're the only 2 people in the country that I am aware of that offer this product. It's very comprehensive. I will say we are not the cheapest because we provide a Cadillac type policy. We provide peace of mind, and that is all at a cost. And I think in the tiny house industry, what it has become now is, if you want a really nice tiny house, if you want to have a warranty with it, if you want to maybe even have the ease of financing it, you're going to get what you pay for. And tiny house insurance works the exact same way. It has been becoming more and more affordable over time, so we are working on that. But I will say, you can get an RV policy, mobile home policy, whatever, at a much cheaper cost. But like I mentioned before, the claim experiences from our current customers has not been the best with those options. So the van conversion insurance, hard-sided yurts, and then we also provide insurance for tiny house builders. So this is general liability, inventory, builder's risks, which is coverage for the tiny houses that are in the middle of being built, commercial auto, cargo. So if you're transporting tiny houses and it were to be involved in an accident, we can also provide coverage for that. So builders, we insure builders and tiny house dwellers in almost all 50 states. There's only like 3 or 4 we don't insure in. And let's see here, kind of already mentioned that. We're in licensed like 45 states. If you ever want to Google how our tiny house policy works, you can Google DP2 policy. This is a homeowners type policy. You can Google that, and it explains what the types of coverages that are provided in that type of policy. So it's a real homeowners policy, but for tiny houses. And it's the only one of its kind on the market. So there's not a competitor of ours that I guess we can say that like they provide a similar or superior coverage. Ours it's the Lamborghini of tiny house insurance. And we can do self-built and non-certified. So extremely flexible, stationary or mobile. So I think I used most of my half hour, but I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. Let's see here. So I'll start from the bottom, from the most recent question, and then make my way up to the oldest one. Let me see here. So what 5 states we're not licensed in? It's very few. I want to say, well, DC is not a state, but DC is not one we're licensed in. Illinois, because Illinois is like really tough to get, or really expensive for us to get licensed in. And maybe like 1 or 2 states that I can't remember offhand that are really rural. I can't remember, but we are licensed in Hawaii and Alaska. So yeah, that does come up every once in a while, because I guess it's really tough to find insurance over there. We are licensed in California for sure. All the big states if we're licensed in. Let's see here. You have information packet for builders. You can go to our website, so tinyhouseinsurance.info. There is some information there. And so I'd recommend go there. You can fill out a contact form and we'll reach out to you as soon as possible. Let's see. Do we cover the whole country? I mean, mostly, but only like maybe 4 or 5 states we're not covered in. see. Asking for your premium package, they do not provide inspection. Let's see. So I'm not sure if I answered this question right already, but how does the tiny house policy compare to the park model? So if it is a true park model, our tiny house policy is going to be like almost the exact same because a true park model policy is similar to a homeowner's policy. The thing is if you have a tiny house that is not a park model and you insure it like a park model, there you could have problems there. But if it is a park model, I mean, I recommend you just get park model insurance. It's going to be easier for you. And then let's see this question. If your claim is declined because they say it's not an RV or a park model, can you get your premium back? No, you cannot. You're screwed. Sorry. That's because most likely what happened is you either spoke with a 1-800 number or you spoke with an agent who is not experienced enough in tiny houses. And if they have not read the policy language, which I will admit, not a very many agents do because it's like 100 pages long. Yeah, you're not going to get any of your premiums back. Park models can get fire insurance. Yes, fire is typically always covered. Let's see. So we're DOIers, want to get insured, but we have spent and should be something I had spent and should be something that if I had to bill over. Okay. So I'm going to rephrase this. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer and you built your tiny house for 50,000, but it costs more to replace, you want to insure it for what it costs to replace. So if it's 80,000 to replace, that's the insurance limit you should be trying to insure it for. And every year in general, you want to raise your coverage limit because inflation, all that kind of stuff, it gets more and more expensive. So if you want to make sure your replacement cost remains accurate, keep raising, I would say like 1 or 2% every year. So if it's 100,000, make it 102,000 next year. Let's see. Do you have a policy that is liability and total loss only? Well, total loss would probably be, well, no, I guess to answer that question, no, but our policy does cover both of those things, but not just only that. And then how do you value a do-it-yourself tiny house? That's a really good question. So we do in-house valuations. So if you want to send in some pictures, we do have a huge database of tiny houses that we have insured in the past, and we can just do some comparisons. We look at square footage, we look at length and build quality, and we can give you a rough estimate on what it should cost. Let's see here. So let's see. So one mentioned person, I have earthquake, flood, hail, wind with varying deductibles, and then at one deductible for all other coverages. So that sounds like it is maybe a mobile home policy or a park model policy. Definitely not an RV policy, but you most likely do not have flood coverage unless it is a separate policy, because flood is usually provided by FEMA or it's provided by a third party, but almost, at least I've never seen it be included in part of a home policy of any kind, like built in. So you might have inland water coverage, like if it was like a river or a stream, but most likely not flood. There's different types of coverages. Let's see here.
Awesome, Michael. Thank you so much, man. Do you mind just doing a quick wrap up, and then we're gonna close out this session?
Yep, not a problem. Yeah, if anybody has any further questions, I'll put my website in the chat really quick. Insurance.info and our phone number. So if you have any further questions, just feel free to reach out. Oh, there it is. So yeah, be more than happy to answer any further questions and provide any quotes if needed, or yeah, just give us a call, send us an email, whatever works best for all you guys.